That was the first step to a dancing career and to an arts management career, I guess. So I always say that teacher and the kindness of inviting me to join something, my body speaking by itself in the waiting area. Then she was the one suggesting I should audition for the National Ballet School. I always repeat this phrase by Maya Angelou saying, people will not remember by what you said, but how you make them feel. I think the concept we need to change now is that we understand that what we need to support is the process and not the product. And that change of perspective, it's tied to the idea of arts and culture being connected to every aspect of life. I don't care how many tickets you sold. I care how many lives you impacted with your work. As a leader, you need to work with an adaptive leadership mindset. That means we cannot react to crisis. We need to be proactive. And for being proactive, you need to be creative. What's your purpose here? And why does it matter? Why are you going to be, how are you relevant in this world, in this situation, in your community, with your neighbors, with your friends? There's something that we have and others don't have, and it's this capacity of transforming lives with an abstract language like the arts. And that's a very powerful tool. So I think what we need to do is to train artists and people working in cultural institutions in literacy, in artificial intelligence literacy, to navigate this new world. We need super powerful, inspiring leaders, superheroes leading these institutions, because they have superpowers and we need to feel that power. But the only way you feel it is when you see the people you are working for and you are working with. I think the moment is now where we can reimagine and rebuild, and where we need to stop thinking the arts and culture as a decoration, as a nice thing to have, and more thinking about the processes and the impact it has in people's lives, with people the center of the discussion.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Artelize Podcast. Today, I'm truly excited because we have a cultural leader joining us. I would say his perspective is unique and absolutely global. I'm talking about Martin Intamuso. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you. Thank you, Paola, for having me, and hello, everyone.
I would like to share a little bit of what you've done so far. It's so much. I had a hard time condensing everything in few words. I understand you have degrees in so many sectors: theater, communication, business, international cultural affairs. I would like to ask you, you were a dancer as well, right?
Yeah, I was a dancer. Well, that's my first love, my passion, and where it all started. I was a dancer until I think 2016, probably. But before that, I had already started working for arts management. So at some point, both my careers were at the same time until I stopped dancing and I concentrated on arts management. And I think that brings another flavor to being an arts manager when you've been to the other side and you know what you're talking about and you know what feelings trigger. And so I think being an arts manager is also being a kind of dancer. So there's kind of movement and the kind of choreography with your team you have to do. So I'm not in another business. So I feel I'm still doing the same. I'm still on stage in a way.
That's fantastic. And I love this parallel. Absolutely. It's a choreography. You need to sort of adapt and lead, but also make sure that everything works.
Yeah. And there's another thing I always say is that as a choreographer, because mainly my work was as a choreographer, I feel like being an arts manager, you have to do so many things at the same time. But also, like when you are on stage, you have to be aware where everyone is so that nothing falls apart. So if one piece is not correct, the rest of the project falls apart. So I think there's a lot in common with managing teams for the arts.
I so much agree. And, also at Artelize, we're artists as well. So I totally understand what you mean. I think that's why I was, very interested in what you were saying. Martin and I met at the Opera America conference in Memphis, and I was literally blown away by the speech you actually gave as a keynote speaker. So absolutely, Martina, I'm Looking forward to dive deeper into this conversation. I just want to mention you have been training at universities like Manchester University, New York University, Yale, the Davos Institute at the University of Maryland. And you have recently, in the past 2 decades, you've held fellowships, residencies, scholarships everywhere, basically across Europe, but also across the 2 Americas. So you always have been pretty much at the intersection of everything, sort of arts, policy, innovation. You're also the founder of the Montevideo Citiada Dance Festival. You are a transformative force in Uruguay's national culture institution. It's called Sodre, right?
Yeah, my first school for dance was in Sodre. So it's a nice trajectory I had. So from being a student, then I was a teacher, then I was the founder of the contemporary dance area in the National Dance School, and then I was the director of the National Dance School for 5 years, and then I was the president and CEO of that institution. So I was in every role, I guess. And I also worked as a choreographer for the National Ballet, so everywhere.
Fantastic. It's a real full circle. And you are also an educator, researcher, and I love the approach that you have also towards including the new generations. I know also you have been training audience development. So that's why it is so exciting to have you here. And just to break the ice and to have our audience and knowing also where all this started from. Maybe you can tell us how was your childhood and how did you get passion to all these different things? And perhaps an anecdote that you have never shared before with anyone, if you'd like to, because this is the little tradition we have.
Yeah, so I was born in Montevideo in Uruguay, and being a child, I was very motivated and motivated by my mom. Mainly, neither my mom or my dad are artists, but they are very interested in the arts. So me, my brother, and my sister, we would have, theater classes, dance classes, and visual arts classes, everything. So motivation was there. And I think it worked because right now my brother is a musician, my sister is a costume designer, and I became a dancer. So the way, I guess that had a lot to do, but the moment, and that's the anecdote I would like to share, my sister would have her twice a week, she would have ballet classes. So with, these typical small academies that are in some neighborhoods in all cities. So she would go there twice a week. And then there was one day that my mother could not take her. And she asked me if I could go with her because she was little. So I went with her. I was 14 years old. So I went with her to wait for her outside. At that moment, probably she was 7 years old. So I was looking at the class from outside. And at some point, I started doing the class outside, looking through the window and repeating what they were doing in the waiting area. And then the teacher saw me and she said, "Do you want to come in?" And I said, no, this is my sister class. And then she said, yeah, but I have other classes that you could join. So I joined, and the rest is history. I mean, that was the first step to a dancing career and to an arts management career, I guess. So I always say that teacher and the kindness of inviting me to join something, my body speaking by itself in the waiting area, then she was the one suggesting I should audition for the National Ballet School. And this is something I always tell students. I always had a teacher or a professor that was very, very kind and very generous to propose and to suggest next steps. So I always advise young people, listen to your professors, listen to your teachers. They've been to many places and they have a trained eye, and sometimes they know better. It's not that you don't know, you are in the process. And I think I was very lucky to have the right people suggesting the right things at the right time.
So true. That's a beautiful story. And I love this concept of kindness, teaching with kindness. At the end of the day, we often hear about, oh, I had to learn the hard way.
I always repeat this phrase by Maya Angelou saying, people will not remember by what you said, but how you make them feel. And when you teach with kindness and with respect for that future artist, people will remember that. And maybe they don't become a very famous artist, but they will be better citizens for our world. And I think as teachers, we always have that responsibility. We are educating the next generation of citizens. Doesn't matter if they choose to be artists, and I hope they will. I want all my students to be great artists or arts managers or, to change the world of the arts. But eventually they can decide to do something else. But that experience through the art is going to change the way they do whatever they're going to do in the future.
It's so beautiful to hear that said out loud. I think especially right now at this very moment, we so much need this kindness and energy and values. Those are so important. I believe you have exactly this strong perspective of how important arts is in our society, not just as entertainment, but also social mission.
There's something I've been thinking a lot and researching a lot. It's like with governments, for example, when they have the possibility of supporting the arts. I think the concept we need to change now is that we understand that what we need to support is the process and not the product. And that change of perspective, it's tied to the idea of arts and culture being connected to every aspect of life. So you can talk about social security, you can talk about health, you can talk about, migration, so many topics. And you can talk about those things. And culture can bring a new perspective, creative way of thinking about everyday topics. And that's when you involve culture in the processes. And that involves listening to people, respecting opinions, respecting diversity of opinions, and having creating what I love to talk about, the third truth. That means there's one truth that you have, there's another truth that I have, but there's a third truth we are going to build together. And culture can do a lot in that. And I think governments have to realize that when we bring the idea of respect of processes, or it's different to supporting a final product. It's different to saying, I want you to produce an opera, so I'm going to pay for that opera. But opera has so many things involved, and lives can be changed through the opera experience. And then you stop thinking about the final product and you start thinking about the whole process. And that's when you realize the impact that culture has in the societies. As you say, in these times, when everything is questioned with good or bad reasons, we need to defend the place culture can have in all the processes we are going through in the world.
This is so beautiful, enlightening, and empowering. What I like to call food for thoughts. It opens your mind immediately and makes you see the potential and the reality, because you're right. Arts, opera, ballet, drama, anything. It's not just arts, or it's not just a product. It's really a life changing experience. I would like to ask you in this perspective. You said it yourself, an artist. And of course, you shared with us that this fact of being an artist gave you something more to understand the complexity of the cultural sector and what it means for humanity, for life. So if I think about the artist right now, or as they were considered so far, there was simply elements of the product, or of course, great stars, beautiful, but what do you think cultural institutions could do to give the artist more of a role in society?
So I would say that I would start with the leadership of cultural institutions. Cultural institutions are nothing without the people that work there. So it's not that cultural institutions have to do something. It's the people working there that have the opportunity to transform lives. So when sometimes the discussion is how many tickets did you sell last season, I think that's an empty discussion. I don't care how many tickets you sold. I care how many lives you impacted with your work. So I always say people working in cultural institutions, leadership mainly, just change your mindset, start thinking that what you do is to create experiences that are life-changing. So that's one thing I would mention. Don't worry about selling tickets. That will come. That will come for sure if you design beautiful experiences, impactful experiences, meaningful experiences for your community that relate to the community you work with. And this is key when you change that mindset. And the other thing is that as a leader, you need to work with an adaptive leadership mindset. That means we cannot react to crisis. We need to be proactive, not reactive. And for being proactive, you need to be creative. You need to learn from the wicked problems we are facing every single day, the challenges you face in the institutions you work for. The communities have demands, the communities have pain points that we need to listen to that. So you need to adapt yourself to reality, and then you start building trust. And when you build trust, and if you are worried about ticket sales, that will come. You have the trust, ticket sales will come up. Because I understand we need to sustain our work. So you need to sell tickets to do what you do. But there's a step before that is the experience you create. I always say that whenever I say I work in the arts, people start telling me stories about their experiences in the arts. Like, oh, I saw this piece, or I saw this beautiful opera, or I went to this museum. So people have experiences that they remember. They remember. And so I would focus on that. I would focus on adaptive leadership. I would focus on understanding what do we present, but also for whom, with whom, and why do we present what we present, and how we adapt to this changing reality. As you see from my bio, I moved to one place to the other. I like to change things to be disruptive. So I don't want people to be that crazy, but I say don't sit in your chair and wait the world and the audience to come to you. Go to the world. Talk to people. Sit down in the street and talk to your audiences and understand what's happening out there and be transformative for them. So, and understand that this is not going to happen without your 300% commitment to your community.
Absolutely. And how do you see the role of the artist in this perspective? Having more interactions with the public. We have already seen that this has changed already thanks to the social media. For example, the artists are not any longer those kind of meteors that are far away from us, but they're very accessible. Don't you think that arts organizations should also encourage that even more?
When the lights go down in the opera house, you don't know who's sitting next to you. And it doesn't matter. As President Mark Skorka says, in the theater we discover our shared humanity. For over 50 years, Opera America has been bringing people together, supporting new works, championing diverse voices, training artists, and helping companies connect with audiences in ways that truly move us. Whether you're stepping into your very first performance or creating the next big production, there's a place for you here. Join today at operaamerica.org/join and help keep opera alive, relevant, and for everyone. Artelize is proud to work with Opera America on groundbreaking audience research. We're donating $500 to Opera America's Audience Research Fund for every customer who signs up for our annual Plus plan. Find all the info and the links in the description below.
I think it's happening already. Slowly, there's especially after the pandemic, otherwise you get isolated and you end up alone. So if you want to share your work and if you want to impact the communities you want to impact, you cannot be isolated. So yeah, I think artists have a very powerful tool in their hands. And I always like to think of the work artists do and leaders in the arts do as being a leader or a maker or a creator with purpose. So I would say, what's your purpose? What's your purpose here? And why does it matter? Why are you going to be, how are you relevant in this world, in this situation, in your community, with your neighbors, with your friends? So why does it matter? So I think an artist always has that need to express and to share, and that can be translated in a beautiful purpose. And then we have the collective purpose. Then we have, what are we doing as a collective, as an arts collective? Instead of fighting against each other, like we can work together and push this forward. And I understand we work in a sector that there's egos, there's all this competition inside. This happens in every sector, work sector. But there's something that we have and others don't have. And it's this capacity of transforming lives with an abstract language like the arts. And that's a very powerful tool. So how can we use that and translate that into our everyday work? And also the other, I think I mentioned this in Opera America, but the other challenge we have is how do we measure that? How do we measure the impact we are having in our communities instead of just doing the work and then, so what happens afterwards? So if I give you money for a project, maybe I'm not going to ask you how many tickets did you sell, but I'm going to ask you how many people did you impact with your work? What was the consequences of the people attending a performance or a museum experience? How the lives of those people and their communities changed with that experience? And what's your plan in the long term for them? So it's not a quid pro quo relationship. It's not transactional. It's not that you paid for the ticket, you leave, thanks for everything, bye. This is a long-term relationship. And as every long-term relationship, you need to, nurture it. And like you bring water to your plants. So that's a long-term you need to learn from the other. So you understand the reaction. So you understand what you are saying has consequences. So that's something some artists are doing it fantastically. I think there are some examples of people that I really respect on the impact they are having. And maybe they are not the most famous ones. Maybe they are community artists that are changing their communities. And I think in the long term, that has a beautiful impact. I don't mean the other things are not useful. I mean, we need everything, but I just have this admiration and respect for those who are very aware of the consequences and the impact of their work.
The purpose, we often talk about the beauty, yes, the great feelings, but the purpose of all this is way greater than everything else. And I absolutely love how you highlight this aspect, because I think it's also reinvigorating for the artist when you work so hard and maybe it's so tough, but when you know your purpose, then maybe you find the strength and the energy to keep going. I think this is also very important, especially in times like the ones we're living through, starting with the pandemic, where almost everybody, especially in the performing arts, lost their jobs. There was that was extremely disruptive. And now also the technology. So there's a big conversation about AI, new technologies, and of course the arts is also included, because we're starting seeing technology both on stage but also off stage. And what is your perspective about the new technology? Here's a special sponsor segment. I have with me Brian Gill, executive producer of the Queen's Opera Theatre. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Paula. Pleasure to be here.
So you're developing something incredibly timely, I would say, a new opera based on the adding machine. Tell us about Mr. Zero.
Okay, thank you very much, Paula. So the playwright Elmer Rice wrote this play in 1923, and it's, as you'll see in the explanation, it's quite timely in this day and age. So Mr. Zero is an accountant who's worked loyally for the same company for 25 years, only to learn that he's going to be replaced by the adding machine. So I think everyone listening to the podcast can relate as we're looking at the advent of AI. I mean, it's already here, but...
Definitely, with AI transforming our industry, this story feels like it was written actually yesterday rather than a century ago. But I am curious to hear what drew you to commission this particular work.
Yeah, I would say exactly that relevance that you hinted at. Opera has always been about exploring the human condition, and right now audiences are, dealing with the technology displacing that human connection in their workplaces, in the consumption of art. Really, I would say we're seeing AI everywhere.
I know also that productions addressing contemporary anxieties generate a lot of curiosity, first of all, because they're so relatable and can create deep connection. So what's your vision for this one act?
Yeah, so our initial plan is to workshop it, to be an intimate production, maybe, smaller, as we're talking about commissioning and making it a one-act opera. And hopefully audiences will see themselves in Mr. Zero's story, so they can relate to Mr. Zero in their own experiences or similar experiences of their friends and family. It's all about really what makes us all human when machines can do our jobs, and ultimately takes away, in my mind, the essential element of human connection.
That's very powerful. And where do you stand with funding this commission?
Yeah, so at the moment we're at the early stages, and we're looking for listeners who are interested in supporting our new work and who believes in not only the opera's power to illuminate our moment in history, and not only today's history but tomorrow and the future history. So it's really a mirror not only for 2026 but beyond. What's the line in Toy Story? Infinity and beyond.
Absolutely. For our listeners interested in supporting groundbreaking new work like this one, how can they connect with Queen's Opera Theatre?
Thank you. I believe the easiest way to reach out to me is by sending me an email, which is simply my first name, Brian, Brian, at Queen's Opera Theatre, which is theatre.org.
We will include all the details in the description below for anyone interested. So, Brian, thank you so much. Sometimes, the most relevant art comes from looking back so that we can see forward, as you were saying. So please show up and support this amazing work, because this is really one of a kind.
Thank you so much, Paola, and all of your fellow staff at Artelize.
I think it's too late. I think this is already here in our lives, completely installed. So it's here to stay. So we need to hurry up. So I don't mean that we need to fight against this, because this is going to be in our lives. That's it. It's here for us. And every sector is adapting it. So I think what we need to do is to train artists and people working in cultural institutions in literacy, in artificial intelligence literacy, to navigate this new world responsibly also. Because there's a lot about authorship, there's a lot about cultural erasure in a way, because some cultural communities are not considered by the artificial intelligence. So the response behind the artificial intelligence is very segmented, it's very biased. So the more we know about this, the more we talked about this, the more aware we are, and then more careful we are with the responses we get. So not so long ago, maybe it changed now, but not so long ago, if you would ask what are the 5 best classical musicians to ChatGPT, you would get 5 men. There was never a woman, or 5 visual artists, you get 5 men. So there's very biased. There's never, it's mainly from Europe or the US. You don't get names from other parts of the world. So if you know that's biased, you can use it responsibly. And then there's the human being consciousness to discern what's useful and what is not. Can be a good inspiration, because it can be a good inspiration. It can give you great ideas to then work, but it needs the human brain behind. So that's why some people are very scared. I'm not scared in terms of AI replacing the artists. I think that's a way of thinking with emotion and sensitivity that AI is not there yet. So we need the artists. We need the human brain with the creative mind behind the final decisions. But we also have the tool of the AI to be used to transform and to, if we use it responsibly and also knowing what this can bring, it can help us. It can help us doing things faster, or it can help us bringing ideas, or it can inspire us. But that's not the final word. That's the first step in the creative process. So it's a new tool we are having. So we should learn how to use it, and people should learn how to use it, and how this can help you in your creative process. So Chinese saying says that we are living interesting times. And I think we are living interesting times. And I want to be very aware and know what's happening, because we will talk about this for decades to come. Go for it. Go for it responsibly. Go for it knowing that it's not that great. So it's great, but not that great. So how can we bring that and use it in a positive way in our institutions, but also in our personal creative processes?
You frame this as a of course, a tool, but also like if you hang on and strengthen those values that you have been sharing with us and highlighting throughout all this conversation, you actually are highlighting even more so the humanity and the human qualities, and just saying, trust your humanity, your qualities, and you will know what to do. You will be able to discern if that's good enough or not, or how you should maneuver that. And of course, get the knowledge. That's obviously the first step. Educate yourself, have this open attitude, open mind. And do you feel like this mentality is actually permeating into the the performing arts industry? And I'm asking this because performing arts have always been super creative and super flexible, but that's not entirely the case when it comes to, for example, audience retention. Recently, we've conducted a research on Artelize, and we saw that like 94% of symphonies orchestra, they advertise and they promote their events with like the name of the composer, the name of the conductors, which obviously in a world that is full of Netflix, it's absolutely anachronistic, I would say, right? It really doesn't ring a bell to anyone anymore, especially towards the new generation. So do you think that now, with the advent of technology, there is a different approach and this flexibility is actually coming for real, for good?
I think it's a forced change. All the aspects you say, it's because some other industries understood that people want to feel, they want to be part of something, not just watching something. And that's the experience idea, what I said before. And other industries understood it long before the performing arts. And then the performing arts now it's changing because as you say, we have other competitors that were not in the radar before. We have to open up. Who are you competing with tonight? So what are the options? I buy a ticket to go to the opera, and then open up your mind. It's not another opera in another city. Your competitors are right in the house of people. They are in the building where they live. They are in the communities where they live. So how can you just... What I'm saying is that in the end of the day, this is about power sharing. This is about people in institutions co-creating with their communities, and stop thinking that whatever the curator decides, it's the final word. Because that's going to isolate you so quickly. Because why do other formats are so successful? Because they co-create. And they just not invite people to come. There's much more complex. I'm not saying you stop curating things that are not connecting with people. I say you have to do both, because the way people will get to that point where you think... I heard a curator say, no, people don't come because they don't understand. And I was like, okay, so your job is help them understand. Your job is not complaining you're not selling tickets. Your job is not blaming the audience for your failure. So you need to understand that the audience out there, they have a knowledge that you don't have. So how can you just replace that, again, transactional relationship to a more human connection? Understand, find out from your audience what's happening there. So performing arts are changing that. There's also about the content. Can we program things that are more connected to our own stories, to our own communities and cultures? I'm not saying you stop programming Swan Lake. You do that, but you also have to bring something that connects to the audience, that maybe it's a first step for the Swan Lake. Maybe it's open up a door, but you need to open up a door that people understand the language. If I meet someone that speaks Korean and speaks to me in Korean, although I can try, I'm not going to understand because I don't speak Korean. So what's the way we can merge together? And then at some point, maybe I speak Korean or they speak Spanish, which is my first language. So I think there's less of a transactional relation between audiences and performing arts, and more of a transformational relationship. There's so much we can learn, and it's so interesting. It's so interesting. When I was in Sodre in Uruguay, I think it was 2021, we did the first ever audience research for the institution, an institution that is 90 years old. They had never done an audience research. And then when we got the results, some people were shocked. And I was like, are you really shocked by the results? This means that you don't understand what you are doing. And then the institution didn't stop doing what they do, but they started changing the way they do it. And it had a positive impact. And in the end of the day, the chief financial officer was happy because he was selling more tickets. But then as a public institution, in this case, it had such a positive impact in the way you have a public good as culture reaching. So this is about democracy. This is about access. So there are so many aspects that are connected to the performing arts that if we just simplify it and say, I'm going to sell tickets for my opera, you are underestimating your power. Sorry to tell you, but you shouldn't be doing this job. You should be working somewhere else, which maybe you're going to do great. But we need super powerful, inspiring leaders, superheroes leading these institutions because they have superpowers and we need to feel that power. But the only way you feel it is when you see the people you are working for and you are working with, which is also another way of thinking.
There's so much in this. And I would like to mention one very simple thing that when you adopt this process or this mindset, you are ensuring the longevity of your arts organization because suddenly your reach is so deep and it's cross-generational as well that you're really setting the foundation for something literally bigger than you, that it's going to survive your impermanence in the industry. You're so right. And when you highlight this superpower, this is exactly, I can hear that this comes from the artists that have seen what happens to the audience exposed to the arts. And also the starting with the youngest generations. And the younger generations, we often have so many barriers, like, no, they will never understand. But I know that little kids, they can consume anything because they're so enthusiastic for life. So if you can leverage that in the audience, because we all have an inner child right inside, and that's exactly what you're touching. It's the privilege of being in the arts. You can touch that part. That's where I so much agree with you. The magic happens.
I think people, especially children, who are exposed to art experiences are better citizens in the future. The creative way of thinking uses another wire in our brains. It helps us to be more creative also in solving everyday problems and in finding out solutions for conflicts. So those that have been exposed to a creative process during school years, that's why I really think art and culture should be present in every school in the world, are going to be more creative and they will have more empathy when they will have to solve a problem in the future. Someone said, we don't teach art because we have too many artists. And I think, well, then with that, why do you teach math at school? You don't want all these mathematicians in the world. It's another tool. It's a soft tool that you need to train another part of the world. Those that have not been exposed, they think differently. And it doesn't matter. Maybe in the future, they are, I don't know. Well, I hope there are more politicians that had art training at some point in their childhood because they will think different. They will have another way of seeing the everyday challenges. And that sensitivity, I think it's something only art can bring to the table, and it changes completely the outcome of a discussion or the outcome of a problem-solving situation. So creativity has to be on the table. And you become a better citizen. I see it with some of my students that are not artists, that they had artist training. They still think in a different way. And they give it as an example. They say, okay, let's see this problem as if it was me in front of a painting, of a canvas to start painting. What am I missing? Who am I not inviting to the table? Who is out of my perspective. And children that have had that experience, believe me, they are the future that we need in this world. I think the moment is now where we can reimagine and rebuild, and where we need to stop thinking the arts and culture as a decoration, as a nice thing to have, and more thinking about the processes and the impact it has in people's lives. So with culture at the center means with people the center of the discussion, and how we are impacting their lives for good, because you can impact for bad. But what I'm saying is that from my experience all over the world, the only I see is the benefits of culture in different shape or form. So let's go for it. And we need to change the way we speak also, to have a more vocal dialogue with those in power, with decision makers that have the chance to use our abilities, to use our skills, to use our connection with people for the good cause. And then we move forward as a community and not as an individual with a transactional relationship. So I'm saying we are ready to reflect on it. We need both institutions, we need brave artists, and we need public policies that can support and empower creativity and also the infrastructure and not the decoration of it.
Martin, thank you so much. I just want to ask you, where can people find you?
So I have my website and I update my schedule over there all the time. I've been talking about leadership all the time and developing different strategies and tools that for me, it's very important to share those tools and online content. So it's going to be online and it's going to be like in, I think, 8 languages. So people from all over the world can access and see it. And there's going to be resources and everything. So if you check on my website, all the information is going to be there. So I hope I can share and give back at least a little bit of all what I got from this beautiful sector.
So it's going to be martinintamusu.com, right? And I encourage everybody to follow Martin, because this is really an amazing, inspiring leader, sharing in this beautiful and kind way such important values and ways of interact and deal with what we are experiencing currently. You're also on social media. I can see LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, X, and we, of course, share all these links. So, Martin, thank you so much from the heart. That was incredible content.
That's what we need. Okay, thank you, Paola.